And now I really just want to introduce and welcome up Erin Walker. Erin Walker is wife of 6-time PGA Tour winner and major champion Jimmy Walker. Erin and Jimmy have been married for 12 years, and they have 2 sons. When Erin isn't traveling with her husband for golf, she is in the equestrian show jumping circuit, which is so amazing. And she chronicles her journey with Lyme in her blog, Tour Wife Travels. I stay up to date with it. It is so good. She's an amazing writer. And she was diagnosed with Lyme in December of 2017 and is really doing a ton to bring awareness to this disease. And we are so thankful for her and her husband for doing that. So without further ado, Erin Walker.
Okay, it's been about 20 years since Public Speaking 101, so I don't know how this is going to go. I'm also in a room with some very highly intelligent people, and I have Lyme disease, and half the time I don't remember my own name. So bear with me if I say refrigerator and I mean microwave, you'll kind of get it. So with that being said, thank you to Jessica and Tammy for having me. My husband wishes he could be here, but as Jessica explained, he plays professional golf, and he's playing this weekend in New Orleans. So I'm going to kind of try to stick within my time constraints and give you both of our stories, which are quite different from each other, and kind of go from there. So my husband has played on tour for the past 14 years. He's won 6 times. He won the 2016 PGA Championship. This is a picture from that day, and it was, with golf, it comes with a lot of highs and lows. Career-wise, it's challenging. We're not like the NBA. We're not like the NFL. It is performance-based. So the money that we make to support our family comes directly from how well he plays golf. And if he plays poorly, we don't make any money. And it's hard. We support a caddy. We pay a coach, we pay a sports psychologist, we pay a physio that travels with us. So we are the CEO. I say Jimmy's the CEO, or Jimmy's the president, but I'm the CEO. So I kind of keep the ship running and make it easy on Jimmy to go play golf. So this was us, at Baltusrol in New Jersey when Jimmy won the PGA Championship in August. This is us a month later at Ryder Cup. And it's funny because Jimmy had symptoms that predate, I'll get to his story, but it's hard to, when you don't find a tick, you don't see a rash, it's really hard to determine where he got this, where I got this horrible disease. And Jimmy he'd won, 5 times before the PGA win. He's ticking right along, and we're going from like the highest high, and he's licking his chops going, okay, I've got Augusta coming up, I've got US Open coming up, and how much further can I take this? And it's just, this is the hunting trip that he went on in November after the PGA Championship. And my husband is not a hunter, but his best friend was there and in town and in South Texas, and he goes hunting. And the following week, he flew to Australia to play in the World Cup of Golf with Ricky Fowler, and he felt awful. He basically downed 2 big bottles of Advil and Tylenol to make it through the week. It was a team event, so he felt like he needed to perform for his partner. They ended up finishing second, which is fantastic. Jimmy felt horrible. He had flu-like symptoms. His skin ached, his body ached, and that was kind of the start of it all. Like I said, he had some symptoms that predated this hunting trip. He didn't see a tick on the hunting trip. He didn't have a rash. So we don't know if that's where he got it. That's just kind of ground zero for us of what we can determine. He had an odd eye event happen in 2013 where he was looking down at his putter. He woke up one morning, he's looking down at his putter, and he had a giant black spot. in his vision. And he had 3 other, if this is the putter, it's on the tip of where his putter would be. He had a couple other spots down here, and basically had some, I don't remember if it was retina trauma or cornea trauma. And, we kind of look back at that and go, was that part of it? Was that a symptom? We never got a definitive answer as to what it was. One doctor said, oh, it's from too many energy drinks. And Jimmy's like, I don't drink energy drinks. Another doctor said, this is probably a virus and your body has reacted a certain way. So for a while, he couldn't see through those spots, and now the vision's somewhat come back through it, and it's kind of like a bubble. But, that was something that happened, 5 years ago, and is that related? So this is a picture of him in Hawaii a couple weeks later from the hunting trip. This was in the beginning of, that's our son Beckett, and that was the beginning of the 2017 PGA Tour season. And I put this picture in here because that's definitive of how he felt. He was exhausted, and the flu-like symptoms were coming. He would have weeks of it at a time. Some days he felt great. I'm not going to say great. He felt functionable. And then there would be weeks where he had to get up and go play golf, but he had no energy to practice. He'd sit down on the tee boxes because he felt so terrible. But, this is his job, and we've got sponsors that are paying us to do this and really paying for him to be out there and represent them. And he didn't feel bad enough, and unlike Jessica, who ended up in a wheelchair, Jimmy still felt like he could play, but it was pretty hard some days. Wednesday of the second tournament of the year, he felt so bad. He's like, I want to withdraw from the tournament. I don't know if I can physically do this. This is another picture of him and our dog, and this is really kind of how our year looked last year. He had enough energy to get up and go play his tournaments, and that was it. His golf game suffered. I think he was pretty severely depressed, whether it was because of the actual Lyme itself causing the depression or the fact that he just felt horrible. He didn't have enough energy to work out. There was no spark in his muscles during a workout, and I could just see it. I could see the way this was affecting him, and we didn't have an answer. We didn't have, we hadn't started doing any sort of testing. We were also trying to get his disability insurance in place. So we didn't really want to know anything yet. I kind of was like, let's just wait. Let's get through all this paperwork that we have to do, and then we'll try to look for some answers. It was at the urging of his sports psychologist. She had Lyme. She's from Washington, D.C., and it was at her urging in late March that we got Jimmy tested. He went to his GP, who did a series of tests, and he didn't want to test for Lyme. He has another patient that has Lyme, and he calls it the Pandora's box. You open one thing and you try one thing and it causes another issue, and it's kind of this cyclical disease that isn't easily solved. And Jimmy said, you know what? Appease my sports psychologist, run the test. So his mono test came back positive first. So we're thinking, okay, he's 38 years old, he has mono. Where he got mono, I was a little curious about that. But, it wasn't mono at all. This is Wednesday night of Augusta. We go to attend a chairman's cocktail party that they invite us to. It's good PR for the players. And 10 minutes before we were walking out the door to go to this event, he called his GP and he said, look, you haven't told me, it's been a couple weeks, we ran the Lyme test, what happened? And his GP said, well, I didn't really want to tell you the night before the biggest golf tournament of the year, but your Lyme test came back positive. And we were both like, this is a joke, right? Like, this can't actually, how is this? It's like, how is it possible? Because he plays golf for a living. But it was kind of a shock to both of us. So we actually had a pretty good all things considered, he had a good week that week. He finished 30th, and it was shortly after that this is another picture of Becca and the dog, but this is the year. This is what it felt like to him. And this was all too common. He'd get off the golf course and crash for an hour, and trying to be a parent and trying to be a professional athlete. And, you know, it's exhausting just doing that when you're healthy. Doing that when you're sick, you know, it just create a whole other spectrum that people don't really realize. The frustrating part, too, was that we live a pretty public life. Before Augusta, there was an article that came out in one of the golf publications that it said Jimmy Walker's never going to win Augusta. He chips horribly. What they didn't know was that and we didn't know at the time, is Jimmy was fighting this disease that had some pretty severe impacts on his brain. I read an article that, I can't remember the Harvard doctor's name, and I apologize for that, but she's done extensive research that basically says Lyme creates as much stress on the brain as a severe concussion. So here's my husband trying to play all year with what equates to a severe concussion. And it really manifested itself in his chipping. I don't know if any of you play golf in this room, but I mean, chipping's hard enough when you feel 100% and you're confident. And you know, here he is trying to chip, and he's, you know, flubbing these chips, and it's not working. He knows the shot he wants to hit, and it's not happening. We kind of coined it this like body to brain disconnect. And he knew the shot he wanted to hit, and he physically couldn't do it. His body, his brain wouldn't physically let him. And, you know, trying to explain to that, we don't have the yips. It's not the chipping yips. It's physically and mentally, like something is happening in his body that it's not allowing him to do it. So, you know, that was hard, and we weren't really publicly saying that he had Lyme yet. And I think we started talking about it in US Open. Here's us doing the Lyme disease challenge. And then I put this picture in also because we attended the Kentucky Derby last year, and we're with these young guys and trying to have a great time. And he felt so bad that night. You know, it's 8:30 and he goes home and he falls asleep because he physically just can't take it. I mean, he's exhausted, and just trying to participate in events just drained him of any excess energy that he had. This is my dad and our son, our oldest son, and Jimmy at the PGA Championship Media Day, and I just put that in there because the little one got a couple other pictures. So this is us in Utah, where I'm from, and so we got the Lyme diagnosis. Like I said, Jimmy's sports psychologist was the one who kind of directed us down that path. Her husband is an infectious disease doctor in DC. So we started there. That was our jumping off point. He encouraged us to see somebody in San Antonio because Dr. Elian kind of wanted to be more of an advisor to us than actual treating physician. Kind of, you know, he wanted to be Jimmy's guider, not necessarily have to go through everything with him. So we saw the infectious disease doctor in San Antonio, and to this day that conversation baffles me because he's like, well, here's some doxycycline, but you seem like you're doing better, so you don't really have to take it. Are you kidding me? Like, I mean, it just is like unbelievable, some of the responses that we're getting from physicians. And I mean, it baffles me. So we decided, okay, we're going to take the doxycycline. He did, Dr. Elian ended up putting him on a double dose for double the length of time. So he did 40 days of doxy at double dose. While he was doing this, he could not play golf. The sunburns from the doxy, I mean, I don't have to tell you that, you're doctors. It was horrible. So he shut down golf for a month, and he, you know, made it through the doxy and felt pretty good. It got rid of most of his flu-like symptoms for the most part. And then his first week back was US Open at Erin Hills in Wisconsin, where the grass is up to here. And I said, wear bug spray and hit it in the fairway. Which, if any of you know my husband, he's not the straightest driver of the golf ball. So I went to the tournament with him, and there were people sitting in the grass, caddies crawling through the grass, and I was just, I wanted to just yell at everybody. And I did on Twitter. I was like, are you people insane? Like, get out of the grass. And somebody actually said back, you're blowing this out of proportion, and we don't need to be worried, and you're just making, And I was just like, you just wait. Somebody's going to get sick this week. So Jimmy played, post-Doxy, he played about 2 months. And it just wasn't quite, the sharpness still wasn't there. We went to Germany to play a tournament, and I watched him, hit a wedge 40 yards short into the water. And you could just see the frustration in his face. And he didn't have an explanation, and it was still, that brain to body disconnect was still there. Physically, he felt a lot better, but mentally, he wasn't sharp enough to be playing competitive PGA Tour golf. He ended up missing, we were done after the first FedEx Cup event because he just didn't play well enough. And it's a year-long point system, and you have to kind of play well enough to keep going through the events. Some of the funny things that happened, he didn't tell me this story until like a month ago. Other things, mental-wise, he would just have these lapses. It was like living with the absent-minded professor. He said that he had put a steak in the sink to thaw and turned the water on, and then he left the house. And he came home, and the sinks flooded the house, and I was gone for that one. So, that's the kind of stuff that would happen, and putting a pot of water on to boil and then walking out and forgetting about it. Also, I'm trying to think, of course, I can't think of the other story I was going to say, but, just little stuff like that. I think mentally it was the biggest symptoms for him kind of happened mentally. This is at PGA Championship in 2017 when he was defending champion, and this is the day, so this is kind of a funny story. After his Doxy treatment and a couple of weeks off, we decided that, or a couple months off, we decided Dr. Elian passed us off onto Dr. Phillips in Connecticut. He felt like we needed a little bit, Dr. Elian's an HIV expert. He's not a Lyme expert, and he doesn't claim to be. He was hoping we were going to be able to fix everything with the keep it simple, stupid approach. And when that didn't work, he felt like he needed to pass him off on somebody who deals with this on a daily, day in and day out on a daily basis. This was driving up to see Dr. Phillips. It was the day of the eclipse, and my husband, if you go on his Instagram account, he is a big astrophotographer, so he was really excited about the eclipse. And of course, he scheduled his appointment the day of the eclipse, and we're trying to drive up through New York and look at the eclipse with sun-safe binoculars. So he was trying to do that while we're driving, going up to this appointment. And he also was supposed to book these 2 appointments, one with Phillips and one with Dr. Sachs at Harvard, who's an infectious disease doctor at Harvard. He was supposed to book these the week after the first FedEx playoff event. He booked them for the Monday and Tuesday of that event. So we're driving up to Connecticut, we're flying to Boston, all while he's wanting to prep for this golf tournament. And we didn't. We went and saw all these doctors, and of course, he missed the cut at the golf tournament, and our season was done. So, that's kind of how the year went. It was this exhausting struggle of trying to figure out what was going on, trying to figure out how to manage it, trying to play golf at the same time. He is on Dr. Phillips' standard protocol now of pulsing his tetracycline. He's done that since August. He's gotten to the point now where he feels like he can do 2 weeks on, 3 weeks off. And for the most part, he's feeling pretty good. He's back to a full work schedule. He's back to a full practice schedule. He has days where he doesn't feel great. There's another wife on tour who's had Lyme and some co-infections for probably over 5 or 6 years. And she says that she has a hard time with the pesticides on the golf course. There's some days where Jimmy feels really, really run down. And I don't know if it's the humidity. We don't know if the pesticides are aggravating it. We don't really know. Can't find a trigger. We're not gluten-free. We're not sugar-free. We're kind of just living this normal life, but we don't see any, we can't find a trigger as to what causes his bad days and what causes his good days. But for the most part, I mean, he's lucky he got diagnosed early. I think if it had not been for his sports psychologist, we still wouldn't know what was going on. So this is another picture in the summer, and again, he just kind of looks pale and just doesn't feel very good. That's our family, more, and then so Jimmy and I we hadn't been on a real vacation with no golf clubs in 6 years, and we decided to go to Italy this year, and on the flight home from Italy, I got this massive headache, and it lasted for 2 months. I would wake up with it, I would go to sleep with it, Advil, Tylenol, nothing was touching it. I started to experience these same symptoms of what he had working out, where you just have this like muscle fatigue and nothing is firing. And I was like, is this in my head? Have I been taking care of him for too long? Or, you kind of start questioning what you're feeling. I've also been a long-time vertigo sufferer, on and off kind of for years. But my vertigo got worse and worse and worse this fall. And he said, you're the only one in the family that we haven't gotten tested yet. I asked 3 doctors directly, do I need to be worried about getting this from my husband? One doctor said, I think you have a less than 1% chance. And even Dr. Phillips, who is one of the smartest guys out there, he didn't seem overly concerned with it. Maybe because he just thought, you probably already have it. I don't know what his thinking was. I don't really know, but I hadn't been encouraged to get a Lyme test. So I ordered my kit off the IGeneX website, and I took it to our GP, and I said, you're a concierge doctor, and I pay you a lot of money. You're going to run this test. And sure enough, my mono test came back first, just like Jimmy's. And then I was heading down to go ride my horses in Florida, and I get off the airplane, and he calls, and he's like, you're never going to believe this, and your Lyme test is positive too. I had a positive serum. Jimmy didn't. Jimmy had more markers than I did, but I had the serum, which he didn't have. So I was bitten by something in late August of last year. It was right here. I had 3 bites, right here and here and here. So it wasn't a mosquito. It was big. It didn't look like a bullseye. It was just big, and it itched, and I thought maybe it was a spider bite. And then the real severe symptoms started about a month after that. I didn't have flu-like symptoms that Jimmy had. Jimmy didn't have vertigo. Jimmy didn't have headaches. I think, the fatigue and the muscle, the extreme tiredness and the muscle fatigue was probably the 2 symptoms that we had in common. But other than that, we didn't have anything in common, any other symptoms in common. So it's been a bizarre 18 months, to say the least. We've known about Jimmy's Lyme diagnosis for about a year now. We've known about mine for 4 months, 5 months, and and the funny thing was, when he was diagnosed, his sports psychologist, for his sanity, was like, please don't Google this. Don't go looking for your answers, because you're going to drive yourself crazy. You're going to hear about these people who have been sick for 20 years, and they had to quit work, and they've been in wheelchairs, and he's like, you're going to scare yourself, and you may not recover. So I kind of was the one that have jumped in feet first, and really have taken this, by the reins, and I want to be our advocate, because he doesn't want to be the golfer that is known for having Lyme disease. He wants to be a great golfer, and that's kind of it. He's kind of a shy personality type. He doesn't want to be in the limelight for that no pun intended, for that. He wants to get back to playing great golf, and I think we're really, really close to that. Last week he finished fourth, solo fourth, and I mean, that was his best result since winning the PGA Championship in 2016. So we're on the right track. We're both extremely lucky because I think we were diagnosed early. And this is me, my trainer, talking through the course. The one thing I noticed this year is when I was riding the horses, I had a hard time counting, like you count the numbers and count your steps in between the jumps. The higher the numbers got, if it was 7, 8, or 9 steps, I had a really hard time figuring out in the line where I was, and that was unusual for me. So I dropped down and jumped some lower jumps this year than I would have normally probably done, but you know, I had to do what was safe. My doctor didn't even really want me riding, and this is my sanity, so I just kind of powered through it. This is me and my horse Playboy, and you know, we're all here in this room. I don't have to really convince any of you. It's convincing all the other people that are outside this room that we need funding and we need help, and this is a real issue, and it's getting worse. And I've tried to get my kids tested in San Antonio, and they're so reluctant, and it's just been, it's heartbreaking. And I'm scared for my children, and I have boys, and it's hard to decide, do you let them sit inside and play on their iPads, or do you let them go outside and be boys? I mean, they're in the woods and they're in the trees, and you know, and it's hard, and I don't want to be that paranoid person, but I'm paranoid. And US Open this year is in Shinnecock on Long Island, and I won't let my kids go because I'm terrified of what might happen. And with nobody to test them where we live, how do we figure out what to do? How do we figure out who to go to? And we need advocates. I mean, if we could even get one in every state, you know, some place that people can go to get answers. I probably get 10 emails or direct messages a month asking me directly who I see, where do I go, who do I talk to? And I can't send them all to Dr. Phillips. He doesn't want any more. He can't take any more new patients. And a lot of people can't afford that. Jimmy and I are extremely lucky that we can pay for care that isn't covered by our insurance. And it's just, you know, it's complicated and it's tragic. You know, people ask us, what are we doing for treatment? And I said, this isn't like cancer. You know, most cancers, you've got A, B, and C treatment. Lyme disease has A to Z treatment. You know, one doctor that we consulted with, she wanted us to do grounding and walk around barefoot in the grass for 20 minutes a day. And I'm like, isn't this how we got this in the first place? So that was, you know, it's an extremely complicated disease and there's no answers. I would be willing to test 100 golfers on tour and I would bet money that 30 of them probably have some sort of tick-related illness. A couple guys we know, one very, very prominent one has had a positive mono test. He's 23 years old, and that doesn't really happen when you're 23. I think most of you would know that if you are 23 and you have mono, you're really, really sick. It affects you differently than when you're, 15 or 14. And Jimmy's like, dude, get a Lyme test. And you can only say so much, and people only want to listen to so much. But it's, I just want to yell at these guys and become advocates for people because they need it. And this was us last weekend. We all wore green in support of Lyme awareness, and this was Jimmy's 4th place finish. And Jimmy and I are two of the lucky ones because we had people in our corner through this whole experience that were guiding us and telling us where to find treatment and willing to test us. And it's hard. I have friends that take the IGeneX kit to their GP and their GP won't run it. Our own pediatrician wouldn't test my children. And where do I go from there? What do I do from there? And how do I finally just ordered the DNA Connections one and had them take that last night, or not, 2 nights ago and shipped it off. And I'm terrified for the results because at least you know, at least you have an answer, but then where do you go from there? And who do you turn to? And there's definitely nobody in San Antonio. And there wasn't anybody. I asked a different pediatrician that we see up in Utah, and she's like, I don't test for it because I don't know how to treat it. But that's not a good enough answer. Find somebody that knows how to treat it. It's not, it is complicated, but the answers are out there. People want to listen and people that want to learn. So that's kind of our story. I know I've forgotten a ton of stuff, and if anybody has questions, ask away.
Thank you, Erin. I have a microphone if anyone has a question.
It can be about anything. It can be about golf or horses. It doesn't have to be Lyme related, but yeah, if anybody.
I have a quick question. Have you found that people in the equestrian world also are suffering from Lyme disease?
I think it's a little bit more because the horses get it. The first time I heard about Lyme disease was probably 15 years ago, and it was an article in Practical Horseman. And they talked about this horse having an undiagnosed lameness. The horse was depressed, as strange as that sounds. And that was my first foray into Lyme disease. And they finally tested the horse, and he came back positive, and went on, I think, to be just fine. But they know how to treat the horses. Doxy works very well. And so also tetracycline on the horses works well. I don't know if just their immune systems handle it better. They seem to get better pretty quickly. I think they're a little bit more open to it. I haven't had as many requests in that space to get to talk about it yet. We're kind of working in that direction, but it's another area that needs to be covered because you're around these animals, and especially the ones in New Jersey. They come back into the barn with their legs covered with the ticks, and then that puts the riders at risk, that puts the grooms at risk. People need to be aware, but I think that they're more open to it. Whatever reason, I don't know, the golf community hasn't paid enough attention, so.
I just want to thank you for speaking up. It's hard, to get people who are in prominent positions to talk about this, and I think you'll find it seems early. I think you're going to find it frustrating. I think you'll find it frustrating, but I hope you stick with it. And I hate to say it this way, but you represent a community that's powerful and wealthy, which is both the riding community and the golf community. So thank you, and please stick with it.
Thank you. I get emotional. I really appreciate that because, it's hard for my husband. He doesn't want to focus on it anymore. He wants to get back to playing normal golf and being known as a golfer and not a Lyme sufferer. So I've really I do feel like people need to know, and we need to get the word out there, and also to raise money for this because it's not going away. And I really appreciate that. And, it needs to be talked about, and it's so immensely complicated, and I hope people start listening. So, but I appreciate that. Is there anybody else? Well, thank you all so much. It was an honor to be here, and thank you to Jessica and Tammy, and it really was a pleasure. So thank you.